Now that we know who's been franchise tagged and re-signed, let's take a look at free agency. It starts in less than a week. Here are 10 players I think the New York Jets should target. Jets! Welcome in, my name's Ryan, I'll be your pilot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you've been here before, welcome back, I love having you here. Boys and girls, I go live every Monday, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock for my live call-in show, and then Tuesday we come back with our Talkin' Jets panel, myself, O'Leary, and Greenbean, so ask us all your Jet-related questions. But I got something to talk about today, and that is free agency. It's right around the corner. We got to see the franchise tag deadline yesterday, so we know who is actually going to be hitting the free agent market, assuming guys don't get their contracts reworked in the next 4 or 5 days. So I want to go through 10 guys that I think the New York Jets should sign in free agency. I want to go through some of the different position groups and everything like that. I actually gave 2 players per position, so it's actually kind of like a 19 player because I didn't do 2 for one of them, but you'll wind up getting 19 players basically. But 10 positions is what I'm kind of looking at here. My positions of need that I'm looking at: kick returner, center, right guard, tight end, wide receiver, linebacker, edge, cornerback, safety, and defensive tackle. So let's jump into it. Let's start with kick returner. This one's an easy one for me. I want Braxton Berrios back. He's 26 years old. He's got a great rapport with Zach Wilson. He averaged 30.4 yards per return. That was first in the NFL for anyone that did over 50% of the kick returns. His long was 102 with a touchdown against the Jaguars. And I'm projecting a 4-year, or I shouldn't say I'm projecting. Spot Track is projecting a 4-year, $23.6 million contract, which is just under $6 million a year. And I would love this. I really want Braxton Berrios back, and I don't want to break the bank for it. I understand there were rumors going around that he wanted $9 million a year to be paid like a top slot, but we know we're not going to be using him in that capacity. We want Elijah Moore to get a lot of the touches on offense, I think, ideally. But I think you want to bring back Berrios. He's been healthy. He's a great team player. He's one of your special teams aces. I think it's important to have these kind of players around. And with so much money in free agency and the amount of impactful free agents that I think the Jets are realistically going to be able to attract, I think it would make sense to retain some of your own here. So I would bring back Braxton Berrios. So like I said, that was the one position that I didn't have anyone lined up for other than Berrios. So if we don't bring back Berrios, I'd probably look towards the draft for a kick returner. Get one of those fast corners that ran like a 4.3 40 the last day of the combine. Next up, let's move to the defensive side of the ball first. I want to talk about safety. This is an area of concern that I think we can really hit home in free agency. This past year, we spent a 1-year, $1 million contract on LaMarcus Joyner. You have Ashton Davis, who's going into year 3, our 3rd-round pick from 2020. You have Marcus May, who's likely walking. I'm predicting he's probably going to go back to Todd Bowles. He'll probably go down to Tampa Bay. So the Jets are kind of left in this weird position of what do we do? We kind of need 2 starting safeties. So I would go free agent, and I would also go in the draft. So in free agency, the top guy on my list, and this is probably my top free agent across the board, and that's Marcus Williams. He's 25 years old from the New Orleans Saints. He was the 7th-ranked safety this past year. He is a true free safety. He has 16 interceptions in the last 5 years. And the Saints are in cap trouble, so the chances are he is going to wind up walking. Now, Spot Track has his contract at 5 years, $75 million, or $15 million a year, so that is a big contract. And it's something that I do question whether or not Joe Douglas is going to want to commit to, because he hasn't struck me as a guy that wants to invest heavily into safety, but I also don't think our roster was in a position to invest into safety too highly, which is why we traded away Jamal. So now, we have our quarterback, we're rebuilt our offensive line, we already have all the draft picks that we're going to, have in this upcoming draft. Is this the time now where he's okay spending for a free agent safety? This is absolutely the guy to do it if you're going to pick one. The other guy as my backup plan would be Justin Reed. He's 25 years old. He was graded as the 87th and 60th safety the last 2 years. But the 2 years before that, he was the 20th and 13th ranked safety. So I'm thinking a change of scenery might do him some good. The Texans' secondary and defense in general the last 2 years has been absolutely atrocious. So I think he's better than what his stats would imply. I would give him a 1-year, $7 million contract. I think this would be a very attractive option for Joe Douglas because I don't think he wants to go after those premium players. I think he's still going to want to play around with that tier 2 kind of prospect. At the defensive tackle position, this is a sneaky area of need for Jet fans, and this is not something that a lot of us love talking about because between Muhammad Wilkerson and Leonard Williams and Quinnen Williams and, all the D tackles that we've taken over the course of the last, 10 years, it feels rough that we're still in this position that we might need one. Ideally, you're kicking John Franklin Myers from edge back inside. You have Quinnen Williams going into year 4 on his contract. We're going to exercise his 5th-year option, so we've got him for at least the next 2 years. We have Sheldon Rankins, who we could cut for $5.5 million savings if we choose to do that. And we have our captain, Foley Fatukassi, who is about to hit free agency. And it sounds like the Jets are going to allow him to test free agency. So what should the New York Jets do? Well, the first player I want to take a look at is DJ Jones from the San Francisco 49ers. Robert Saleh drafted him. He's only 27 years old. 18th ranked defensive tackle last year, grading out as a 73.7. He had 2 sacks, 16 hurries, and 40 stops last year. Now, they project him to get a 4-year, $32 million contract or $8 million contract per year, I believe is what Spot Track had. I would do this. I think this is someone that may want to follow Robert Saleh, has the connection with our coaching staff, and then we have the need for it. I always love bringing in guys that our team or coaches know from past experience. The next guy, this is going to be one of our own, and this is Foley Fatukassi. In the event we can't get DJ Jones, I would like to bring back Foley. Now, I understand if you want to let him walk because he's not getting the pressure up the center that you'd probably want to see him get, but he's one of the top run defenders in the league. He was the 49th ranked defensive tackle last year. He was the 10th and 14th ranked defensive tackle the previous 2 years. So he was, top 15 for 2 years going. Like I said, team captain. He did have 0 sacks, 11 hurries, and 28 stops. So basically, kind of like half the production that DJ Jones had this past year. And I would give Foley a 2-year, $16 million contract. I know he was looking for, I guess it was $8 million a year, so maybe you try to come back a little bit if he tests the market. Hopefully his price comes down a little bit as people get to see what he's about and where other free agents go. Next up, we're looking at linebacker, and linebacker is going to be an area of need for us. CJ Mosley's getting up there in years. We drafted Nasir Al-Din and Sherwood as safeties to come in and play those will linebacker roles. We brought in Jared Davis last year. That was kind of a failed experiment, and we're kind of in this weird flux of we don't really have anyone solid at linebacker right now. Quincy Williams is really exciting, so I'm looking forward to having him back next year. I don't know what direction we really go. With CJ Mosley's contract, I think we're probably going to cut him after next season. So you're going to want some younger guys, and you're going to want to bring in, maybe some veteran leadership that might play well with Mosley. So I have Foysaid Alokun. He's 26 years old from the Atlanta Falcons. He was coached under Jeff Ulbrich, our defensive coordinator, former Atlanta Falcons linebackers coach. He had 131 tackles that led the NFL, along with 47 assists that also led the NFL. He had 3 interceptions, and that was 3rd for linebackers across the NFL. I'm predicting he's going to get a 4-year, $40 million contract at $10 million a year. He hasn't really had a crazy ton of good graded production, so I'm not exactly sure where he falls. Bulk stats like tackles aren't generally a good indicator on how strong a player is playing, as much as it is a indictment on the defense that you're going to have to keep getting tackles, I guess. So it's weird. You kind of have to go back and look at some tape, but I like the connection with Ulbrich here. I would try to bring him in, and he's young, so you got a little bit of upside. My second player that I would look at is Bobby Wagner. Now, he was just released from the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, they're hitting full reset mode. He is 32 years old, so he's a little bit older. Robert Saleh connection from his time in Seattle. He was the defensive quality control coach when they drafted Bobby Wagner, and Saleh traditionally linebackers coach, so there's a little bit of familiarity there. He was the 15th ranked linebacker this past year. He had 118 tackles, 48 assists, 1 interception, and 1 forced fumble. I'm predicting a 2-year, $14 million deal at this point. I mean, at this age, I don't know if he's going to command top dollar anymore. I get the feeling he may want to go to a contender. I could see him trying to spite the Seahawks and going to a team like the Rams, the 49ers, or the Cardinals. We'll see. Similar to like what Richard Sherman did. All right, now let's move to cornerback. This is a nice, sexy position you want to try and look at, especially for us Jet fans, right? We love our Darrelle Revis. We love our Antonio Cromartie. All the secondary pieces have kind of been our no-fly zone, if you will. Now, cornerback has been an issue. We have Bryce Hall, who we think is a nice number 2. You have a surprise in Brandon Eckles, who has a really nice upside. probably him and Hall you'd like to see as more depth pieces, not necessarily your starting guy. Michael Carter and Guidry playing out of the slot, I really like that a lot. But we're going to need to add a veteran presence in this secondary. It's a very, very young secondary. And the first player on my list, no questions asked, would probably be option 2 for me in terms of free agency. Maybe, I don't know, J.C. Jackson. That's where I'm going with this. 26 years old. He was the 7th-ranked cornerback this past year. He had 8 interceptions. He leads the league since 2018 in interceptions. He leads the league since 2019 in interceptions, and he leads the league since 2020 in interceptions. So this guy gets around the ball. He creates more opportunities for your offense to score points. That is incredibly valuable. Plus, he's coming from a division rival, so I love stealing division rivals because they're going to have a little more juice going against their former team 2 times a year. So I really like J.C. Jackson. He's going to be massively expensive. They're predicting a 5-year, $105 million contract. That's $21 million a year. So that is steep. I'm not sure if I see Joe Douglas handing over that kind of contract at this particular point in time. My next guy, going to go for a little bit of a savings on the cheaper side. That's Dante Jackson. He's 26 years old. He was the 67th ranked cornerback this past year. He was 25th in 2020. So he took a little bit of a drop this past year. He runs a 4.3 40. This guy is fast. Last year, he had 51 tackles and 2 interceptions. I would give him a 1-year, $5 million contract. Give him an opportunity to try and show what he's worth, and if he performs well, then maybe you give him an extension after next year, or maybe we allow him to walk in free agency next year. But we'll see. I think the veteran presence here, a little bit, a few more years in the league than some of our guys, might not be a bad route to go. But this is a position that I'm eyeing the draft for. I ideally would like a vet as a veteran presence, but I want to solve cornerback one with a top cornerback in the draft. The final position on defense, we're talking edge rusher. And this is going to be a very hot topic because there's a bunch of good edge rushers in the draft this year. Jets haven't had one in 15 years. We've been talking about this for a long time now. What do the Jets do? Do they go with one of their top 10 picks, or do they try to plug a hole similar to a Vinny Curry that we had this past year? And that's kind of where I wanted to go with this. I'm looking at slightly older edge rushers because I want our premier guy to be a top 10 pick. So I don't want to overly invest. So my first guy up on this list is Chandler Jones. I really like Jones a lot. He's 32 years old, 49th ranked edge this past year, but he graded out as an 89.8 pass rush grade. So if you're using him as a situational pass rusher, just let him pin his ears back and go after the quarterback. I don't care what else he's got to do. He had 22 tackles, 11 sacks, 21 hurries, and 15 hits this past year. They're predicting his contract to be 3 years, $43.7 million, or $14.5 million a year. That sounds basically like the Lawson contract from last year. He got 3 years, 45, which is basically a 2-year deal with a team option for the 3rd year. So I would really like that for Chandler Jones. He's still highly productive, and I think you can definitely prioritize edge in this type of defense. The other player that we're going to take a look at is Darius Smith, and now he hasn't been cut to my knowledge just yet, but it seems like that's kind of coming down the pipeline for the Green Bay Packers, unless Rodgers negotiates enough where they can wind up re-signing him. But based on his holdout last year, he wanted more money. Then he was a little upset they didn't make him a captain after holding out. So it's this whole weird thing. Then he winds up getting hurt, hurts his back in week 1. He's 29 years old. In 2019, he was the 3rd-ranked edge rusher. In 2020, he was the 14th-ranked edge rusher. And then, like I said, this past year, he hurt his back. He did come back for the playoff game, but it's going to be interesting to see how he heals and where he's at right now. He has the C.J. Mosley connection and Joe Douglas, that Baltimore connection. I would like to bring him in. Now, they're projecting 4 years, $66.8 million a year. That's $16.7 million. That's a little rich for where I'd like to be. So I would say this is probably a little bit further down my list than I would want. Maybe he would be willing to take a 1-year prove-it deal because of that back injury. I don't know if anyone's going to pay him this much money if there's concern about the back. But we'll see. Now let's move to the offensive side of the ball. Now, I want to talk about center because this is a position that I did not really think was going to be a need because Conor Mcgovern graded out as the 9th best center this past year. But there was these weird situations throughout the season where he wound up Zach Wilson gets hit, especially in the Patriot game, and Conor McGovern or the offensive lineman just kind of walk away from Zach. And when your quarterback gets hit, I want someone in your face and pushing the defense around. I don't care getting a penalty in that kind of situation, obviously depending on what's going on. But I think if someone hits your quarterback, you got to take a swing at them. So I do think we are looking at center. We've been linked to Bradley Bozeman, Ryan Jensen, Tyler Linderbaum, and we tested out Zion Johnson, the guard from Boston College, at center. So clearly there's some type of, back of the mind versatility at center, that we're looking at. So my first center that I would like to go for here is Bradley Bozeman. He's 27 years old. He was the 11th ranked center this past year. He actually was a guard for the first 3 years of his career, switched to center. He's from the Ravens, so Raven connection, obviously. And I actually like that he plays the guard center hybrid role. We value versatility on our offensive line for sure. And I like that he was the center for Lamar Jackson. Lamar holds onto the ball a long time. So it's one of those weird traits that you kind of have to be aware of. And because it's easy to, get yourself caught running down the field, assuming the quarterback has thrown the ball or has ran out of the pocket at that point. So I like him. I think he's a really good option here. 4 years, $40 million. They're talking $10 million a year. I'm okay with that at 27 years old. You got your guy for the duration of Sam's rookie contract. My next guy up at center would be Ryan Jensen. He's 31 years old. He was the 14th ranked center this past year from the Buccaneers. Now, Joe Douglas scouted him in Baltimore, and he is known for his nasty streak. He is a mean offensive lineman, and that is the attitude that Joe Douglas wants to instill here. Now, he is always healthy, so he's going to be available. His contract, they're expecting a 3-year, $30 million contract from Spot Track, so $10 million a year, just like Bozeman, but 1 year less commitment due to the age. Now, I have heard rumors Jensen's looking for $15 million a year. I don't think I'm willing to pay $15 million a year for a center. I'd rather go the younger route at that point. At guard, we are talking a few different options here. We drafted Elijah Vera Tucker this past draft, so we are set on the left-hand side. And then we traded for Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, Dr. Guard, from the Kansas City Chiefs this year. And he actually filled in really well. I would like to bring LDT back as a baseline, depth piece at that position so we don't have to overextend ourselves. But there's a few guys I would like to target in free agency that I think would be an upgrade, so that way we don't have to try and target guard early in this draft. Ideally, with a defensive-heavy draft, I would like to play to the strength of the draft and draft defense at the top 2. So my first guy that I would look at is Laken Tomlinson. He's 30 years old. He was the 13th ranked guard. He is from the 49ers, so there is a connection with John Benton, our offensive line coach, Mike LaFleur, our offensive coordinator, and Robert Saleh, our head coach. So this is always a nice little connection here. He knows the blocking scheme. There is no learning curve. He's coming in, and we are able to hit the ground running. 3 years, $15 million. That's $5 million per year. I'm all on board. I would totally sign up for this. My second player that I would look at here, Austin Corbin of the Rams. He's 26 years old, so he's a lot younger. 22nd ranked guard this past year. He runs a similar system to LaFleur because the McVay-Shanahan tree kind of branched off in Washington, and they both went their separate ways, but they both run relatively similar concepts. They're predicting a 4-year, $35 million contract. That's $8.7 million a year. I would be fine with that. Either way you want to go, you get a little bit older if you go with Tomlinson, where you're probably looking to draft a guard at some point or at least have LDT, back. Corbett, I think, is more of a long-term answer for sure. Now, I know we're a little upset with how the tight end market is shaping up. we lose Dalton Schultz, you lose Jazicki, you lose Njoku from the market. It's not looking good for the tight end position. I think it's going to be an area that we're going to definitely hit in the NFL draft early, probably as early as the second round. Now, our tight ends have been bad. We traded away Herndon last year. We traded away Dan Brown, who ended up coming back, after he was cut from the Chiefs. You have Croft, who might be coming back. I would like to cut Ryan Griffin, so I don't think he's going to be on this roster next year. So where do we go? I have a player in mind that I wanted to trade for last year. We didn't do it, and that's Zachertz. I think it's important to have a veteran in this locker room because I do want to take a high tight end in this draft, and I do think that it's important to have that kind of mentorship. Zachertz, 31 years old, got traded from the Eagles to the Cardinals last year, so obviously leaving Arizona possibly. 29 ranked tight end this past year. He's still productive, can block, and he can catch. They're predicting a 2-year, $15 million contract or $7.5 million a year. For 2 years of Zachertz, I'd totally sign up for that, no problem. The second tight end I'd be looking at is O.J. Howard. He's 27 years old from the Buccaneers. He was the 69th ranked tight end out of 70 last year. So you're talking like bottom of the barrel in terms of Pro Football Focus rank. But but I like his upside. He was a former first-round pick. I remember back in the Jamal draft, there was talk that the Jets might try to target this guy in the top 10, and I think the Bucs wound up taking him around pick 20 or so. So why would we want him? I'm banking on upside here. He was behind Cameron Brate and Gronkowski, so the third tight end, but he wasn't even the third option because you still have Godwin, you had Antonio Brown, you had Mike Evans, you had Leonard Fournette, so you're probably talking at best the sixth option on that offense. Let's see if he can bud into a star here. I'm going to give him a 1 year, I don't know, call it a $4 million contract, whatever it is. I think the upside is there. It'd be silly not to roll the dice on this. And then I want to talk about wide receiver. Wide receiver is an area of need for us because obviously we had a lot of the dropsies. We had a lot of injuries last year, so you want to try and solve wide receiver one. And a lot of people are going to be looking towards the draft at a Garrett Wilson, a Drake London, a Treylon Burks, something along those lines. I'm of the opinion I would prefer not to go first round on wide receiver based on the depth of this draft. I think the value is found in the second round. So I'm looking for more of a veteran in free agency. Like, I would like to trade for Amari Cooper, ideally. So, but I'm not going to have him on this list because I want to go free agency. Let's look free agency here, not trade. So the first player up on my list is DJ Shark. This is a guy that a lot of people have been reaching out to me about. He's 25 years old. He's 6'4", 198 pounds. So he's a very, very tall wide receiver. He has the frame that you're kind of looking for here. And I would like someone that does not, he's a different type of body style. I want someone that can jump up and go get the ball in the red zone. He runs a 4.3 840. This guy is fast. Now, he did break his ankle in week 14, so you're going to have to check on that speed. I don't know if it's going to be the same after having that type of injury. And he's played well with relatively shaky quarterback play the last few years. So, again, you're banking on upside. SpotTrack has his number at a massive contract. I shouldn't say massive, but a little bit more than I would have felt comfortable really giving him. They have him predicted as a 4-year, $47.6 million contract, which is just under $12 million a year, which is basically what Corey Davis got this past year. I believe he signed a 3-year, $36 million contract. So one extra year, a guy that's 25 years old and has insane upside if he winds up staying healthy and you have, he hits his upside. And the last guy on my list, this is a Robert Saleh connection, and I think you guys know who it is, and that's Allen Robinson. He's 28 years old, going to be 29 years old, I guess. He is a number one wide receiver. He knows Robert Saleh from his time with the Jaguars, and he's battled through rough quarterback play his entire career. Last year between Fields and, Dalton and Foles, whoever they had over there, not a great season. I think he had around 700, 800 yards or so, and really was kind of wide receiver 2 in that scheme. But I think he's still a good player. I would have no problem bringing him in. SpotTrack definitely had him for more money than I want, or at least a longer duration than I want. I would prefer Allen Robinson on probably a 2-year contract. They had him predicted for a 4-year, $65 million deal at $16.3 million a year. So that's a little bit rich for where I'd like to go. Again, I'd like to go second round in the draft, or someone like, maybe an Amari Cooper that you can cut after 1 year if you do trade for him on that crazy contract that he's got. But guys, those are my players that I would like to target. I'm sorry it's not actually 10 players, so I kind of, gave you bonus ones there. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Which players would you like to see us grab? And as always, go Jets.